Om Jnana-timrandasya Gananjana Slakaya Chakshurun Militanyena Tajmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Shri Yukta Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sran Sri Rupam Sahagajatam Sahagana Raghunatavitam Tam Sujivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakavitam Scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopikanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tata Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshri Vishubhanu Stuti Devi Pranamahi Hari Priye Vancha Kalpya Trubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So today we've got 29 on the board, but I believe I'm supposed to read 28 as well. Okay. 27 and 28. Okay. Okay, so I'll just read this and then we'll chant 29. Yaso labdavaro mato navadyo mama sistribir tapo yoga balonyandya samashta nigama aham. I should probably start with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So the translation here is, the demon Hiranyakashipu received from me the benediction that he would not be killed by any living being within my creation. With this assurance, and with strength derived from austerities and mystic power, he became excessively proud and transgressed all the Vedic injunctions. Text 28. Dristya tat tanaya sador mahabhagavato rakya tvaktya vimochito mrityor dristya tvam samito danu. By great fortune, Hiranyakashipu's son, Prahlad Maharaj, has now been released from death. For although he is a child, he is an exalted devotee. Now he is under the protection of your lotus feet. In text 29, I'll read it and then we can all repeat. Etad vapuste bhagavan Jayata paramatmanaha Sarvatro goprir srishthanasyan Mrityor api jigram sata Etad vapuste bhagavan Jayata paramatmanaha Sarvatro gopritrishtyasan Mrityor api jigam sata Etad vapuste bhagavan Jayata paramatmanaha Sarvatro gopritrishtyasan Mrityor api jigatsatam Etat, this, vapu, body, Te, your. Bhagavan, O Supreme Personality of Godhead. Jayata, those who meditate upon. Paramatmana, of the Supreme Person. Sarvatra, from everywhere. Goprityor, the protector. Santrist Sat, from all kinds of fear. Mrityor Api, even from fear of death. Jigamsata, if one is envied by an enemy. Translation. My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are the Supreme Soul. If one meditates upon your transcendental body, you naturally protect him from all sources of fear, even the imminent danger of death. We can repeat this. Oh, my dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are the Supreme Soul. If one meditates upon your transcendental body, you naturally protect him from all sources of fear, even the imminent danger of death. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Everyone is sure to die, for no one is excused from the hands of death, which is but a feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mrityur sarvam haras chaham. When one becomes a devotee, however, he is not destined to die according to the limited duration of life. Everyone has a limited duration of life, but a devotee's lifetime can be extended by the mercy of the Supreme Lord, who is able to nullify the results of one's karma. Karmani nidranati kichu cha bhaktya-bhajam. This is the statement of the Brahma Samhita 5.54. A devotee is not under the laws of karma. Therefore, even a devotee's scheduled death can be avoided by the causeless mercy of the Supreme Lord. God protects the devotee even from the extreme danger of death. Etad vapus tabhagavan dhyayata paramatmanaha sravato gopir santrastan mrityur api jigasatam. O my dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are the Supreme Soul. If one meditates upon your transcendental body, you naturally protect him from all sources of fear, even the imminent danger of death. So this verse talks about something we all have to wrestle with at some point in our life. Actually, two concepts. One is fear, and the other one is death. And they certainly seem to be linked together. Many people have a very serious fear of death. And this verse is reminding us that as devotees, if we're actually engaged properly in our appropriate dharma, serving Krishna, then he says, don't worry. Everything will be taken care of. There's nothing to fear. But what I think is even also very interesting, extremely interesting about these Vedic literatures, and we're actually hearing a wonderful story here, although we're coming to the end of the story of the Leela between Hiranyakashipu, Nrsingadev, and Prahlad Maharaj. These Vedic stories are instructive to us because they're so extreme. So there's so many other examples, and I'll get back to this one in a minute. For example, we see Arjuna, when he approaches the battle of Kurukshetra, asks Arjuna, bring my chariot between these great armies so I can actually see what I'm dealing with. And he sees his relatives, his teachers, his friends, half of his family's on the other side of the battlefield. And he's going, oh my goodness, this is an incredible thing you're asking me to do. You want me to go to war against all these people who I should be worshiping. So this is an extreme example of a difficulty that he's facing. And there's so many others. Kunti, she was the mother of the Pandavas, and of course also Karna. And as a mother, one of the worst things they could possibly have to deal with is the fact that their children are going to war. What to speak of going to war against each other. Karna had taken a vow that I will either be dead or I will kill Arjuna. And when Kshatriyas make vows like this, they're very powerful. They usually mean what they say. And so Kunti is facing this terrible, terrible dilemma. What mother could expect a worse dilemma than that? Nowadays, some ladies, unfortunately, will have a child that is not born alive, and it's very devastating. Well, what to speak of if her children are alive, they're healthy, and now they're going to go kill each other? It's a very, very, very difficult situation. Duryodhana was probably one of the most difficult people you could ever expect to have to deal with. When we put these things in perspective in our daily lives, how many of us are dealing with a Duryodhana? We may have somebody that we don't get along with, or somebody who disturbs us, or somebody we don't like for some reason. But Duryodhana had the house of lac. He tried to burn down the Pandavas, and he tried to cheat them, and he tried to do so many horrible, horrible things and sent them to exile. And yet the Pandavas were so magnanimous that even after all of these difficulties, they're saying, no, it's okay. We don't need the villages. And Krishna's saying, no, now I'm going to intervene. I'm saying you may be okay with just being a village peasant like the rest of the people, but I'm saying, no, you are Kshatriyas, you have a duty to rule. You will therefore rule at least 5 villages. But even Duryodhana wouldn't give that. Another extreme situation. And then look at the difficulties Devaki was put in with Nanda Maharaj. Her own brother put her in jail and then killed all of her children as soon as they were born. And they had to endure this difficulty, this terrible, terrible. How many people have to deal with something like that? I don't know of anybody who's had to deal with something like that. These Vedic literatures are filled with these very, very extreme situations that none of us can say, oh, I got a worse situation than that. Who has a worse situation than Arjuna or Devaki or Mother Kunti, any of these people? Vidura was another example. He was in the court of Duryodhana. He didn't like being there. He was referred to as the son of a Suraputra. He wasn't really officially ordained as a king, and he was constantly being insulted. And eventually he said, okay, I think I've had enough of this, and he took off and he went for pilgrimage. But these are extreme examples, and of course probably the most extreme example for those of us who are familiar with it is the story of Harishchandra. He was a great king, but his word was so powerful that he renounced his entire kingdom because it was the honorable thing to do. And eventually the story goes on where he's even facing death itself. And yet Harishchandra, his word was still very powerful. The word is so important. The Gita says, for a man who has been honored, dishonor is worse than death. And Arjuna is actually instructed by Krishna in this way. And he says, even if you go to this battle, look at the balance. He's saying if you go to battle and you lose the battle, you'll be recognized and you'll be glorified and you'll get the benedictions of fulfilling your dharma as a Kshatriya. And that is glorious. That'll be a glorious death. And if you win the battle, you will be the king of Hastinapur with your brothers. So either way, you go to the fight. And Arjuna is saying, well, I don't know if I want to do that. And Arjuna is saying, and that's a bad decision, because that definitely is a bad decision. So you either have victory in either case on this side, or you have a terribly bad outcome on the other side. And in this way, of course, preaching to him, as we know in the Bhagavad-Gita, Arjuna eventually came to his reason. Krishna chastised him a little bit. He said, "You're speaking like a fool." And he came to his senses. So in this way, we have all of these extreme examples to give us a purpose and an understanding, because I like to take what Prabhupada has given us, these Vedic literatures, and try to figure out how does it fit in our daily life. So when we have some difficult person or some difficult situation, sometimes it's helpful to think of what would have Arjuna done, or what would have Devaki done, or what would have Kunti done. Because none of us are facing anything nearly as extreme as this. And in this case, we have Prahlad and Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu was such a terrible, terrible demon that he had everybody upset. All of the demigods were terrified. What are we going to do with this guy? He's threatening the entire planetary system. And then you have Prahlad. He's not a full-blown strong man like Arjuna. He's a 5-year-old little boy. And Hiranyakashipu is terrorizing the world. And Lord Brahma gives this benediction, Hare Krishna, which I believe in a verse before, a couple verses before, he's recognizing maybe it wasn't such a good idea to give Hiranyakashipu this benediction. And there's a lesson in that too, because the mind sometimes thinks, well, I'll try to find some shortcut, or I'll try to find some easy way to do something. Or in Hiranyakashipu's case, I'm going to find some way to beat death, because that's what this verse is all about, the fear of death. And even as powerful as Hiranyakashipu was, he was also afraid of death, even though he was such a powerful person. If he wasn't afraid of death, then why would he have asked for the benediction that he asked for, to not die inside, outside, during the day, during the night, by any animal, by any beast, in the air, in the land. So many things he asked, thinking he was so smart. And again, another extreme example of trying to outsmart Krishna. And still we see, no, can't do it. Krishna outsmarted him. But what's also particularly interesting is that, I don't know how prevalent this is in India, but I know in America it's a very serious problem. There's many people that are suffering from all sorts of mental and emotional disorders. And I have observed that much of this is coming from the fact that they have absolutely no foundation to put their feet on. They're just wallowing, trying to figure things out. They don't have the opportunity and the advantage to learn from these tremendous Vedic literatures. They give us strength and inspiration and instructions on how to deal with the day-to-day affairs in our lives. And so they're becoming more and more crazy. The National Association on Mental Illness in the United States, which has been recently formed, says 1 out of every 4 people are being treated either medically or through some cognitive therapy for social disorders, emotional disorders, because it's so problematic. People don't know what they're doing. And when you actually start doing the research and you start tracing back where all of these dysfunctional behaviors come from, what you find is much of it comes from bad parenting, bad childhood activities. And yet we have an example here of Hiranyakashipu, who could have a worse father than a father who's trying to kill you in 10 different ways, throwing you off a cliff, throwing you in a tank of snakes, trying to drown you, trying to poison you. Who can have a more dysfunctional father than that? And yet Prahlad Maharaj was so an exalted soul that he was able to understand that none of that is really relevant to his life. He had complete faith in the fact that Krishna would protect him, which I know sometimes I get doubtful. Krishna, are you there? Are you going to help? We're having some trouble down here. Okay, so, but in this case, Prahlad is so staunch.
not a moment wavering. And when Hiranyakashipu literally completely rips the intestines of Hiranyakashipu's out, everybody in the court is terrified. They're all terrified, and their demigods are terrified, and he's roaring, and his hands are filled with blood, and there's intestines flying everywhere, and everybody's going, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And they go, you go. The smallest kid in the entire palace is pushed forward. He's 5 years old. Prahlad, says, you go deal with this. And Prahlad says, oh, okay. And he goes with his hands, he says, oh, my Hiranyakashipu, you destroyed my father. I'm feeling so bad for my father, right? Nrsingadev is saying, I'll give you whatever benediction you want. And he's going, I don't want any benedictions. The devotee doesn't want anything for his service. No, I'm telling you, I'm your Lord, I'm giving you some benediction. So what does he say? He says, well, maybe you can do something nice for my father. Try to imagine, his father's tortured him, and now he's saying, well, try to do something nice for my father. So, the question is, I got to see what time it is. Okay. So this is our situation. We're stuck in this material world, and we all have to deal with death in our own ways. And the concept of fearlessness is there. Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita, I am both fear and fearlessness. And we know that even our spiritual master, Bhakti-yoga Swami, is known as Abhai-charan, fearless. And in fact, actually, if we look, and we're going to talk about a little bit later about Ramanujacharya, who's one of our great personalities in our disciplic succession. But if you look at all the acharyas in our disciplic succession, one thing they all had in common was this element of fearlessness. And Bhakti Siddhanta has made some comments to the effect that if you are afraid of public opinion, or if you are afraid of being insulted, or if you are afraid of being belittled or made fun of, or any of these things, then you're probably not really qualified to preach Krishna consciousness, because when you're preaching Krishna consciousness, especially in the West, but I think it's probably true here in India to a great extent, some people aren't going to like it. They're going to go, go away, don't bother my sense, I don't want to give up my sense gratification, you go away, you're threatening my sense gratification. And if they're not ready and you're not strong, there will be conflicts. And I think many of you know, in the early days of our Krishna consciousness movement in the Western world, even the devotees, and I think still today, some places it's still happening, they go to jail. I know in our Russian centers, some of these Russian devotees were locked up in jail for incredible amounts of time because they didn't like what they were saying. So developing fearlessness, we can talk about it, but to actually imbibe it in our being and really have that kind of confidence, that's a whole nother thing. That's going from the theoretical knowledge to the actually practicing this philosophy. And it's important to recognize that there is a big difference between fearlessness and foolishness. Foolishness, I mean, you can run out in the middle of the street and say, I'm not fearful, but that's foolish. That's not fearlessness, that's just foolish. So when we're dealing with our lives, sometimes we have to make decisions and we have to be careful. And what is the difference between fearlessness and foolishness is that in fearlessness, we use our intelligence and we make calculated decisions. We look at the risks, we understand what the risks are, and then if it's a situation where, well, you only have so much control, Krishna ultimately is in control. We really don't have any control in that respect. So you make a calculated decision, and if you're some concern, then you might say, well, I'm going to rely on Krishna. So many devotees in the early stages of this movement were in challenging situations, and they relied on Krishna. And more often than not, he would help them. He would pull them through. Magical things would happen. So we have that song, Jeev Jago, wake up, sleeping soul. And the other part of the song says, you're sleeping in the lap of Maya. So waking up is fearlessness, and sleeping in the lap of Maya is foolishness. So again, there's that distinction that's being made. It's based on knowledge. Bhagavad-Gita gives us instruction that living in a world of dreams and illusions and, hypnosis and believing that you're doing this, that's actually in the mode of ignorance. Dreaming and imagination and bewilderment, those are the people in the mode of ignorance. But a devotee doesn't behave in the mode of ignorance. He behaves in the mode, he makes a calculated evaluation and assessment of the situation, and then he proceeds cautiously, and he has faith that, okay, Krishna, if there's something here that I'm not aware of, I'm counting on you to help me become more aware of it so that I can act accordingly. So there actually was an old picture, I don't know if it's still there, but in the original Bhagavad-Gita, there was a picture of a devotee in the ocean. And the ocean, especially some places like around the Horn of South Africa, I believe, terrible, terrible waves and winds, and it's never nice. The boats don't like going there because it's very difficult oceans. So you get thrown into this ocean, the waves are slapping up and down and going around, and it's cold and it's dark, and all of a sudden you're thrown in this ocean. What are you going to do? You're not going to survive very long. And yet the illustration shows how Garuda is coming with Vishnu on his back, and he's reaching his hand down to catch the devotee. And that's our opportunity there, to grab onto Krishna's hand, or at least the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. That's the difference. Without having that hand, the people in America who are suffering from all of these serious emotional and mental disorders, they don't have that hand. They're in the ocean flying around, floating around. Any moment they could drown. And yeah, that's an extremely fearful situation. But we don't have to be that way. We can take advantage of these wonderful stories and these wonderful instructions that are given in the Bhagavatam and so many books. Prabhupada's translated so many books. The Chaitanya Charitamrita, and of course the Bhagavad-Gita itself is all one really needs. So what I'm actually saying is there was a great emperor actually in the Chinese dynasty. I think his name was Sun Shu. He actually wrote this book called The Art of War, and I think it's recognized around the world as a very profound book, and I think we can draw some lesson there. And he says, when you're attacking your enemy, and our enemy is Maya or illusion or bewilderment, he says you have to know your own strengths and your own weaknesses. And you have to also know the strengths and weaknesses of your enemy. And if you actually understand these things, you're going to do better than if you just go blindly charging in, not knowing anything. So the onus is upon us to do our homework, to do our studies, to become knowledgeable, to understand. We all have our own strengths and weaknesses. What might become easy for me may be very difficult for some of you, and the same is opposite. What might be very easy for some of you, I might be going, how do they do that? I don't know how they do that. We all have our own dharma. And the verse in the Bhagavad Gita says, Sreyansa dharma vaiguna paradartmat swanusita. One must follow his own dharma, his own duty. Don't do somebody else's duty. This argument was given when Arjuna was saying, I think I just decided I'm going to become a renunciate, I'm going to go to the Himalayas, and you can have this war and let somebody else deal with it. And Krishna is saying, no, you're behaving very foolish. Why are you saying like that? You are the most powerful Kshatriya on the face of the earth, and if you go run off and put on a lungi and sit in the Himalayas, everybody's going to laugh at you. And unfortunately, he took the instruction. So knowledge of our situation, which is very precarious, like in the ocean, reminds us that we need some association. We need every day chanting Hare Krishna, reading Prabhupada's books, having Krishna Katha, taking prasadam. As soon as you start drifting away from that, then this ocean starts encasing upon us. So many problems. And this is why there are so many problems in the Western world. Because people are losing faith in religion, and there's many reasons for that. I could mention several, but I don't think it's necessary. But they're losing faith. The other religious traditions are just not standing up to the test. People are becoming more and more well-educated, and they are not going to settle for some sentimental thing, God works in mysterious ways, and just accept it and don't ask any questions. One of the most beautiful things about our Krishna conscious philosophy is that you can find very reasonable answers to most of the dilemmas and the difficulties of life that we all encounter. I know for myself, that's what attracted me to become a devotee. I'm reading, I'm going, oh my goodness, I've never heard this before. This is fantastic. So, if we proceed in that way, then Krishna will give us the intelligence, and he will give us, he says, to them who worship me with love and devotion, to them I carry what they lack, and I preserve what they have. So you might say, oh, I can't do that. But maybe you can, but you have to try. And if you try with earnestness, Krishna will give you the intelligence. Our movement began this way. Many of the original devotees who came to the Krishna consciousness movement, a lot of these people, they were in the right place at the right time. They didn't necessarily have any formal education. And yet they were asked to print books and to run temples and to manage bank accounts and to, keep the deity worship going. And some of this management is a whole science in itself. And how did it happen? Because their desire to satisfy Srila Prabhupada was there, so Krishna gave the intelligence. So, we can have the intelligence to overcome the fear of death if we're really focused on the nature of our situation and engage ourselves thoroughly in the Krishna conscious process. Then we will have the strength to overcome every situation and know that Krishna is protecting us. I want to move a little bit, before we go to questions, I want to move a little bit into Ramanujacharya, because today is Ramanujacharya's disappearance day, is that right? So Ramanujacharya was, I believe, last year, in fact, 2017, was the 1000th anniversary of his appearance. So it would be 2017, anyhow, deduct 1017 would have been when he appeared. And Ramanujacharya, as was Srila Prabhupada, a fearless individual. We most of us here, I think, have some appreciation for the fact that Srila Prabhupada, in fact, this is a very good example of what I was saying earlier. Srila Prabhupada came to the Western world. For most of us in the Western world, I'll speak for myself, I was born in a very, from India's standards, a total malecha, yavana, low-class life, eating all sorts of things, doing all sorts of things, having no real understanding of anything. That would make me completely disqualified. And yet Prabhupada taught me and many of my God brothers and God sisters that no, you can clean up your act. You can stop doing these things. You can take up this Krishna conscious philosophy and throw out the bad habits, or as we say, accept things which are favorable and get rid of the things that aren't favorable, and you can demonstrate you do this for some time and you're committed, then I will give you some initiation and you can help me teach this Krishna consciousness. And we know that many places here in India still that's considered radical. It's not appreciated by some people, even though it makes sense. If you're just rubber stamped Brahmin and then you're acting like, foolish person, or doing all sorts of very inappropriate, not setting good examples, then how is that helpful? Whereas if you're actually living the life of a Brahmin and you're trying to set a good example and you become knowledgeable and can give Krishna Katha, then yes, why not? You can become Brahmin also. Quality, not birth. So actually, 1,000 years ago, Ramanujacharya faced a similar situation, and we can only imagine it was probably 100 times worse. But he was one of the first ones who said, no, these people that you're discriminated against, they're also spirit souls. They also deserve to be able to be given the highest knowledge. And also Ramanujacharya was the first one to move, or I should say, to stand up and start arguing against the teachings of Sankaracharya, who had already made a tremendous impact. And we know that Sankaracharya's mission, he was an incarnation of Lord Shiva, and he was specifically instructed to come and to teach the non-dual Advaita tradition. And there's an interesting story in the Padma Purana where Krishna is instructing Lord Shiva. He's saying, you go and you teach this non-dual tradition. And he's going, oh my Lord, why do you want me to do that? And he's explaining to Mother Parvati, and he says, my Lord Vishnu has asked me to go and teach this non-dual tradition. And the actual way it's translated in the translation I was reading, he said, that will be the worst thing that will destroy everything in the world. That's how dangerous it is, according to Lord Shiva's instructions to Parvati. It is the worst curse for mankind, this non-dual tradition. And that's what Shankaracharya was teaching. And it's still prominent. And in fact, in the Western world, and I suspect to a certain extent maybe here in India, it's growing, this non-dual tradition. And what is the non-dual tradition? That everything is just one big vibrating ball of Brahman. There is no you, there is no me. Your concept of self is an illusion. Everything is an illusion. It's just energy. There is no God. There is no good or bad. It's just energy. That's it. So Ramanujacharya came along and he said, wait a minute. No, that's not right. And he added some characteristics and he said, there is the Brahman, but that Brahman has distinct characteristics. And they are the relationship between the Brahman and the energies within the Brahman. Now keep in mind, he was the first one to kind of like break the Advaita egg, if you will, to crack that egg open. It was a very strong. And keep in mind also the reason why Shankaracharya had to do that is because Buddhism was very prominent. Buddhism came along and threw out the Vedas, and part of what his mission was to reinstate, get people to go, no, now you're really lost. You throw out the Vedas, we're back to what's going on in the United States right now, which, by the way, a lot of people are taking up Buddhism. There's probably some analogy there or some connection. People are taking up Buddhism. What is Buddhism? Voidism. There's not even a blob of energy. That doesn't even exist. It's just nothing, nirvana, without qualities. That's what the Buddhist tradition is. So Shankaracharya came along and said, no, let's at least put something out there, and we'll call it the Brahman, and that's it. And so these are very powerful philosophies that people fall into. So Ramanuja comes along and says, okay, we got to start breaking this egg open. And he starts bringing in these qualities. It's referred to as Vishishta Vedanta, specific monism, where he's still acknowledging there is a sort of oneness to it all, but it's not just this non-dualistic energy, but there are actually attributes within this energy. And he was a social reformer, like I said earlier. He actually brought in the people that the Smarta Brahmins, we don't want to deal with them. It was the tradition back then was even if a lower class person were to step in the shadow of a Brahmin, the Brahmin would immediately have to take a birth. And it was so, take a bath. And it was so socially dysfunctional that if somebody were to do that, they'd beat that person. There's very, very severe consequences. So Ramanuja said, no, this is not right. And so in the same way, Prabhupada did that for us. And one of the things that Ramanuja did was he recognized that it's very difficult. You can teach and teach and teach and teach and teach and teach. And some people will hear and some people will come and participate. And other people will go right out. And he knew that. And his compassion was so great that he actually engaged people. And that's exactly what Srila Prabhupada did. He came and he taught. And of course, some of us were able to appreciate the instructions in the books and so forth. But in some cases, people weren't so philosophically inclined. And I've heard anecdotal stories that Prabhupada said that when it comes to death, some of you are so still lost and bewildered and enamored by the material world, you won't want to go back to Godhead. And he said, but I will come and I will grab you by your sika or your neck beads and I will drag you back to Godhead with me. Right? So Ramanujacharya had the same attitude. He said, sometimes we get so bewildered and so buried and so covered over in the day-to-day affairs. Like I said, we just went through so many examples of these tremendously exalted personalities and all these extremely difficult things they had to deal with. And then we go out and the rickshaw waller says something and we get upset and you're like, oh, it just blew my whole day. Some little thing. Now just think how many times it blows our own day. Think of how many things we are fearful of. Because our fear is a reflection of our lack of Krishna consciousness, because a devotee is fearless. Not foolish, but he's fearless. So if we have some fear, then how can we become Krishna conscious? I have an example where I live in California. Some people have this, it seems so insignificant to me, but they have a fear of getting on the bus to come to Krishna Katha. So that's the first thing they have to deal with. You have to get overcome. What is the fear of the bus? It's not a rational fear. I mean, buses maybe crash occasionally, but not very often. Or you have a fear of flying. If you have a fear of flying, for us in the West, we can't come to India. So the first thing you have to conquer is the fear of flying. So whatever our fears are, we have to conquer them. So, anyhow, back to Ramanujacharya. So some of the specific things, and I don't want to get too buried here because we're getting into some very deep philosophical distinctions. If you look at all of our acharyas, Ramanujacharya, yesterday we talked about Madhavacharya, and then there's Nimbarkacharya, and of course we eventually get down to Lord Chaitanya, who gave us the Achintya Bheda Tattva tradition. But it might be a little difficult to fully and properly convey some of the subtleties, but I'll try a little bit here to show what his contribution was. And also each one of these acharyas, as they came along, separated by a couple hundred years each one, they contributed something very specific towards Lord Chaitanya's final Achintya Bheda Tattva tradition and a lot of the principles that we follow. So the two big ones that Ramanujacharya contributed was service to the devotees is essential. Now keep in mind, it seems like, well, that's obvious. Well, not back in his day it wasn't. Because remember, Sankaracharya was saying there are no devotees and there is no service, and both of those things are an illusion. So he's coming along saying, no, they're not an illusion. Those are essential. Whoa, now there's some conflict. And bhakti is untinged by karma or jnana. Bhakti is untinged. Your karma, you may have some karma, but when you take up bhakti-yoga, Krishna says, okay, he says this world is a machine made of the material energy, and it's grinding, like you can see, maybe sometimes you see the sugarcane wall, and he's got this big gear, and he sticks the sugarcane in, and it just crunches it, and the sugarcane juice comes out the other. Well, that's the kind of machine we're in. We're like the sugarcane going into the machine. And we're going to get crunched. But if we take up Krishna consciousness, all of a sudden, yantra rudhani mayaya, whoop, stop that machine, stop that sugarcane wheel. That's my devotee. He's under my protection. Let the world carry on, but my devotees, they're my business now. They don't go through that sugarcane machine and come out squeezed, their brains squeezed out. Okay? Which is what's happening all over the world right now. His brains are being squeezed out. Okay? So, bhakti is, so these two contributions Ramanujacharya gave us are very powerful. Remember, back then when everybody was thinking it's all just Brahman, that's it. And remember, even though Bhagavad-Gita was there, Krishna says, I am the source of the Brahman. He's behind it. If you are enamored by the Brahman, you'll never see Krishna. Brahmano hi pratishtanam. Krishna says, I am the source of that Brahman. It's there, but that's not the stopping point. That's for the people that want to get caught up in it. Okay, so he comes along, he says, service to the devotees is essential, and bhakti is not tinged by karma or jnana. And the jnana yogis just love to sit there and mesh the mind about, I think this, I think that, the book says this, the book says that. Yeah, okay, just keep doing that for as long as you want. There is no rasa in jnana. Rasa is there in bhakti. Okay, so let's see if we can get a few more points in. Anyhow, it looks like we're running out of time. But let me just make one more final point. Some of this is a little hard to grasp the first time you hear it. And we're getting down into really just philosophy, which is what the pundits and the great acharyas in our tradition were very adroit at. They were very expert at. So Ramanujacharya said, he came along, he said, well, if the distinction between spiritual knowledge and spiritual ignorance is unreal, then spiritual ignorance and the self are one. So what he's saying is that if everything's, remember he's dealing with this concept that everything's just one ball of energy. But he's using a empirical observation but we see ignorance every day. We see ignorance manifesting in so many different ways. Is that also part of this one big energy? Is that also something that's not distinct? He's saying it must be distinct. Because if that ignorance is part of all of it, well then that means we're also ignorant. And in fact, we can understand that without the Vedic literatures, we have basically two alternatives. For those of you who saw the presentation I made the other night about our 4 flaws, we know we have 4 flaws. Imperfect senses, propensity to cheat, propensity to be illusion, and the propensity to make mistakes. This is the cornerstone of when one actually should have the strength to understand that you as an individual are helplessly incapable of figuring anything out. Even though the whole New Age movement is going out saying, it's all within you. Well, Krishna's within you for certain, but you have these 4 flaws. And you have to face that. That was one of the things that helped me surrender to Krishna consciousness, because I realized I just couldn't get around it. I said, well, what about this? What about that? And rascal brain is, well, I don't want to surrender, so let me figure some way around. No. Imperfect senses, propensity to cheat, propensity to make mistakes, and the propensity to become illusioned. How are you going to figure anything out on your own? You can't. Which leaves us in this dilemma. And this is where Ramanujacharya is coming in. He's saying, either we are eternally destined to live in a state of perpetual ignorance, just bumping in the walls, or what's going on in the Western world right now, where 1/4 of the population is mentally ill. And it's getting worse. And those are the people, by the way, who are recorded as seeking help. What about all the mentally ill people who aren't even going in to get help? Which, by the way, is a lot of people, because there's a social stigma by saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to work, I'm working hard, I'm raising a family, I'm paying my bills, hopefully. But I have no idea, I'm not happy. I don't know why I'm doing all this. I was told to do all this, but it's not satisfying. So again, it's the sugar cane, okay? So that leaves you with 2 choices. Either we are perpetually doomed to be ignorant for the rest of eternity, or there has to be some other way for us to actually understand what's going on in the world today. And what that is Vedavyas has given us the Vedic literatures, and Srila Prabhupada, through his incredible austerity and dedication, has translated it into English. And now, you go to the store out here, you see how many different languages this is being given to the entire world, so they don't have to be wallowing in this state of perpetual ignorance. So I think I'm supposed to stop now. It's 9 o'clock. If anybody has any questions or comments, there's one gentleman in the back, I think.
Thank you for the class. So just like Srila Prabhupada guides in the purport that devotee is not under the laws of karma.
Mm-hmm.
So at what stage does he become free from the laws of karma? I mean, anyone who's chanting Hare Krishna, or when he gets initiated, or when he is totally purified of inner contamination, or any practicing devotee under the laws of karma.
When does the scale flip to the other side is what you're asking, right? It's a good question. I can only answer from my own personal level of awareness, but Krishna says, all of them as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. And one of the most esoteric aspects of our Krishna conscious philosophy is only you know what your relationship is with Krishna. Because we see sometimes, people can pretend and do so many things. The heart may be pure, maybe not pure. So I generally tend to think for myself, as soon as I'm thinking, oh, Krishna is going to, I'm going to do this. This is what I was saying earlier in the lecture today. There's a difference between foolishness and fearlessness. There's a difference between moving into a situation going, okay, I think I've studied everything I can possibly do and I'm going to move forward in an informed decision and rely on Krishna to protect me and keep the laws of karma maybe from collapsing in on my head. And just assuming that, oh, I go to the temple every day, I chant Hare Krishna, I'm just going to go do it and Krishna's going to protect me. That's a very presumptuous attitude. I don't think that's a safe attitude at all. The devotee is always very, very thankful. And there's this story of Narada Muni talking to somebody. I don't know the details of the story, but I remember this aspect where he's talking and somebody is saying, well, can you go find out what Krishna is doing? Because Narada Muni, of course, has got a sort of a friendly relationship with Krishna. He can check in with him anytime he wants. And so they were asking, they said, could you go see what Bhagavan is doing, Lord Krishna is doing? Yeah, sure, I'll go check in on him. He's my buddy, I'll go check in on him. And he became a little bit proud, or maybe that's not the right word, but just assumptive. I can go see Krishna anytime I want. I'll just go over and say. And so he went, and Krishna hid. He said, oh, you're getting a little too proud here. You think you can come see me anytime you want? I'll just go hide over here. And even I think Radha was saying, why are you doing that? He needs to learn a lesson. Even Narada Muni, he's so powerful. And after teasing a little like this, then finally Narada Muni is humbled. He said, what's happening? Why? Where's my Lord? And then Krishna finally appeared. He said, why do you do this to me? He said, you have to understand the proper situation here. So as soon as we become presumptive, or assumptive maybe is the right word, that I don't have to worry, I went to the temple this morning, Krishna will take care of me. I don't think that's a healthy mentality. It should always be, Krishna, I am doing the best I can. I have to engage in a difficult situation. Please help me deal with this difficult situation. It's that mood of humility and love. That's the only thing Krishna cares about. He doesn't care about how much scripture you memorize or how many temples you build or even to a certain extent how many devotees you make. Because you can do all sorts of things but have the wrong attitude. It's the attitude of love and humility and tolerance. These are the strengths of the Brahman. So to the degree, Krishna said, to the degree you surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. To the degree you do that, to that degree you are being protected by his special mercy, and you are actually extraditing yourself from the laws of karma. But don't think that you deserve it. What do we deserve? You don't really deserve much of anything. And if you actually think of it that way, then Krishna says, this is an advanced soul. Okay? Anything else? There's another one here.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Prabhuji, just heard that when you try to surrender to Krishna, when Prabhupada says that surrender requires only a minute, I would think that they will do what will do Hare Krishna. What he says in the Bhagavad-Gita and all this, it's a philosophy. But in Russia, some years ago, many devotees were like tortured and they were put in jail. Even after they surrendered to Krishna and they were starting the activities. So why the Maya just don't convert it to Yoga Maya? Why Maya concept came and even after surrender, because Krishna said that, okay, after surrender I will take care of you. So the karma of the previous birth. So why they were like acting on that? So why they don't nullify the karma of previous birth?
Okay, I'm not sure if I heard all that correctly, but I think what you're asking is, you gave the example of the Russian devotees who, especially in the beginning, had to endure so many extreme difficulties, predominantly from the government, I believe. And the question is, why, if they were so sincere and so dedicated, were they put through that tribulation? Is that the question?
Yeah, basically not about it was quite the question, but I want to just ask that after surrendering to Krishna and just following the rules and regulations, so why they get all the this kind of troubles and problems? Because many devotees, when they surrender to Krishna, Prabhupada gave them initiation.
Right.
So I don't think that they should deserve such kind of.
You don't feel like it's a fair deal. They gave so much and they had to endure so much, and they were obviously very dedicated. I'm not an expert in what they went through, but I have some sense. They were thrown in jail and eating dry bread and whatever it was, you know. And I think, if I understand correctly, I believe one story I heard was that the Russian devotees went out on Sankirtan, and the government being what it was, and they just didn't want them. They had purchased a farmhouse or something. I'm not sure how accurate this is, but I think it's true. They had purchased some farmhouse, and when they were out on Sankirtan, they came back and the government had a bulldozer and they just bulldozed the house down, finished. And they came home and there was just a pile of rubble. So yeah, it asks the question of why, for such sincere devotees, would there be such a severe tribulation that they have to overcome. And it's a difficult question. It's one that we all have to wrestle with. Why me? Okay? Yet we don't fully understand the full spectrum of all of the details that are going on. Even Mother Yasoda, or excuse me, Mother Devaki, as they gave the earlier illustration, why did she have to endure having all of her children immediately killed? Or any of the examples I gave, you know, why was it that Duryodhana was such a nasty personality that because he was so stubborn and so foolish, it ensued the worst war the world has ever seen, the Battle of Kurukshetra. And we can see over the course of time that these gave tremendous examples of encouragement and enthusiasm. So those devotees, I know I find it extremely inspiring to see what they went through. I have my share of tribulations and difficulties where I preach in the United States. You know, people don't necessarily like when I'm trying to share Krishna consciousness. And I get a little moody and say, why are these people so foolish? You know, but I'm not getting thrown in jail. You know, and I go, what am I whining about? You know, I live in a beautiful city in America. It's one of the most opulent cities you can live in the United States. You know, beautiful weather and beautiful streets and everything's wonderful. And I have some difficulty, and I think of the devotees in Russia, and I go, I fall at their feet. You know, so
maybe we have to suffer like this until devotees.
I'm having difficulty hearing what you're saying.
I'm saying that like Russian devotees like this suffer. You also have to suffer maybe sometime.
Well, they're certainly setting examples for the rest of us to really appreciate. And I know in the early days of our movement, you know, true confession, I came a little bit more towards the end of Srila Prabhupada's presence. I got initiated right here in this courtyard, in fact. In 1976, it was a big initiation. About 80 people got initiated. It was Prabhupada sat right there. And sometimes I lament and I think, well, I could have come to the movement so much sooner. Why did Krishna wait so long for me to become a devotee? I felt like I could have done so many more things. But then I realized that no, my mind was not prepared to do the things the earlier devotees had to do. They went out on street sankirtan, 10 hours a day, every day of the week, which I could do to a certain extent, but my brain is wired in such a way that I do different things. It would have been very difficult for me to do that. So Krishna brought me at just the right time where I could find my service within the Krishna consciousness movement where I was able to actually stay. Okay, so we all have to endure in our service, we all have to endure so many difficulties. And when we see the difficulties of the Russian devotees and the earlier devotees who also went to jail, I actually did do that a few times. I went out and booked distribution in the parking lots of America, and the security would come. It was kind of like a cat and dog game, or a cat and mouse game where the security would come and we'd go this way and then they go that way and we go this way and they go that way. But eventually you'd turn around and they'd be right there. Okay, you're coming with us. Okay, night in jail. But I mean, it's nothing serious in America. They just go, okay, we got you off the parking lot, now go home. And of course, we turn around and go right back in the parking lot the next day. I mean, but that's really, it's nothing compared to what they went through, right? Their lives were seriously threatened. And in some cases, I think they lost their lives. And that's a good thing for us to meditate and think, how committed are you? And I'm not recommending martyrdom. Again, there's a difference between foolishness and fearlessness. And there's a saying that says sometimes it's more difficult to live for what you believe in than to die for what you believe in. To stick around and to continue to press Krishna consciousness and share it despite all of the resistance and obstacles and difficulties and political problems and attitudes of the people and proud people. It's difficult. So all of these experiences that we have and we see are instructive for us. And we all have our level or threshold. Not all of us are going to do the same thing. And not all of us are expected to do the same thing. And that's one of the other brilliant things about the Krishna consciousness movement is that we have individual personalities. Otherwise it'd be very boring. We'd all be walking around like little robots coming out of a factory, We'd all be doing the same thing. We'd all be eating the same way. We'd all be wearing the same clothes. And everything would be like a big square box with little robots walking around. No, it's the flavor and the variety of all the different personalities and all the different talents. Some people can paint, some people can build, some people can chant, some people can cook, some people can do deity worship. And, it's okay. You're not going to be expert in everything. But find that thing that you can do and do that. Any other questions? Okay. Haribol, thank you very much, Prabhu. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.